Welcome to the Foundation Series, your deep dive into startup compensation with industry leaders from across the startup world. Join me, Matt McFarlane, a people operations leader turned compensation specialist, as we uncover the strategies and practices driving success in tech startups around the world. Hear insights from heads of people, founders, and experts as we explore how to build robust compensation frameworks that not only fuel growth and retention, but do so in the dynamic startup environment that we all know and love. Let's get into it. Compensation isn't just spreadsheets, it's strategy, emotion, and trust. Today, we reveal how using storytelling can make your compensation approach more human, credible, and effective at scale. Before we dive straight into the topics, I'd love you to spend a brief moment, and for those who aren't familiar with you, a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I love that. The not being familiar with me, it's like they'd be perfectly forgiven for not being familiar with me. So my name is Naomi Trickey. I'm the Chief People Officer at a company called Mews. We provide hospitality software for hotels in order to free up the people who work in those hotels to provide remarkable experiences for their guests. I'm also a NED for an embedded finance company called Griffin. So I chair the People and Governance Committee. So that is me. I've worked in technology for a scarily long time in a variety of roles, but started becoming I became a Chief People Officer about 10 years ago. So I've been doing this work since then.
Naomi, I'm really excited to talk to you about a particular passion area of mine when it comes to compensation, which is how to better use storytelling to make it really effective. I find it such a, heads down in spreadsheets, it can be easily kind of misconstrued as this very analytical sort of cold topic. You're talking about numbers, you're looking at graphs, things like that. What's the kind of value, do you think, that comes from infusing storytelling into something like compensation?
Oh, I'm a big believer in storytelling. So I actually have an English degree, and I'm known as a reader. So if you want any book recommendations, I keep with everything I read, and it's so the power of stories for me is absolutely a given, and I could waffle on about it for days. But in relation to comp, the way in which I think about it is that comp is actually one of the most human things I deal with. So I try and flip that narrative immediately. Essentially, we don't work for free, pay matters, and money helps people live the kind of life they want for themselves and their families. And in order to understand that, it requires deep empathy. And if you want to develop empathy, you need to read books, and you need to read stories, because from storytelling, you understand how someone else feels and how someone else perceives the world. But you also need to bring people along with you for the journey when you're dealing with pay. And stories have a momentum. So if you think about the key components of the story, and there's mountains of this material on the internet for people who want to go deep on it. And there's some very generous people who share their thinking on this. But essentially, you've got the macro, then you've got the core insight, which provides that momentum, and then you've got the solution, and then you've got the vision of the future. So I sort of think of it as a curve, and that you need that momentum of a story to get people through that journey. And how does that relate to pay? Well, the macro, what's the world doing? What's cost of living? What's the political climate? What's going on in the world? What does that mean for your people? How are they feeling about it? What does that lead you to think is the best way to approach pay in your org? So how are you going to get over that kind of macro sort of challenge? And where ultimately do you want to get to with pay? How do you want people to feel in the future? So it's actually, I think it's directly translatable to storytelling, but you just need to apply a bit of empathy, and also look up from the spreadsheet and say, right, what's going on in the world, and then join the two together. What's going on in the world? How might people feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing to really. The story should be that should be driving a lot of what's happening in the spreadsheet in some respects as well, right? Like you're
100%.
validating, a theory or a hypothesis or whatever to help, or you're helping understand whether or not something exists in reality, and just helps you talk about it with that much more credibility. I love that. How does this tend to show up in the organization? Like what are kind of the key maybe cultural artifacts or ways in which storytelling is like really intentionally infused when it comes to comp?
I suppose it's in terms of the presentations that we do around it, but it's also in terms of the strategy that we build. So my strategy is built with that storytelling in mind. So when I was sharing, when I was gearing up for this year's strategy, I showed the team the strategy that I'd created last year, and I overlaid my thinking onto that story arc that I just described. And they were like, oh, okay. Because everyone always thinks, well, how do you do that? But actually it's really obvious to me. And if you just literally draw the arc and then you plot the points on it, they're like, oh, yeah, of course. So for me, it's about the presentation of the philosophy. That's the key artifact, whether that's in a strategy form or in a presentation that you're doing to a bunch of managers, so that they have the language that they can use to then go out and share with people. So it's not just, right, here's a little, here's 5 cells on a spreadsheet that explain your story. It's like, and here's why. Here's why we're here. Here's the context. Here's the analysis that's been done. Here's the story that we're telling about pay. And here's here's the source data. Like here's the broader context.
Yeah, I love that. And my next question was going to be like, how do you see then that overarching kind of story? How do you see that trickle down to maybe the toolkit of leaders who are having these conversations? It's the really tough ones, right? Like someone's missed a promotion, or someone, maybe there's not the budget to give the kind of increases that, that someone's looking for. Some of those really gnarly conversations. What ways does this kind of approach influence that?
Yeah, so I am quite careful, despite I too am passionate about stories, but I'm quite careful about overusing storytelling as a concept. You want to infuse it, as you said. So it's about infusing messages with empathy and human understanding. So it's about what matters to people. Why do I want them to care? What do I want them to care about? What are the insights that I can gain from what I've observed or read or listened to? And how do I help them over that conflicting moment towards the vision of the future? And in order to do that, you need to empathize and you need to understand. So I really want people to move beyond the transactional. Pay is not the only means to progress within an org. So tying progression to other things that people get excited about and address the challenge of development. So talking about skills, talking about internal mobility, talking about training opportunities, talking about an opportunity to do some exciting work or work on an exciting project. Those are components of a story, and they are a reflection of the empathy that you have, because you understand what matters to someone and you can then play back to them how you are going to address what matters to them, not necessarily just in relation to pay, but in a much broader context. And so that's how I use storytelling, really, is to kind of help people move over that hump, but also to gain a kind of perspective and a critical distance, without diminishing the very real point that pay matters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does, right? It's so fundamental to
Of course.
The employment relationship. Amazing. Well, look, rounding this out then, you mentioned you're a reader. What's the reading list if someone's wanting to maybe brush up or get a little bit more competent, understand that framework that you mentioned just a bit earlier on storytelling? What would be your top 1 or 2 things you direct people towards?
So I really love the work that Jeremy Connell-Waite does. So he is a marketeer essentially by trade, but he's also a storyteller and he works for IBM, presentations, all sorts of things. So he is brilliant, and he's one of those generous people. There's loads of material on LinkedIn. He's got a website because I think it's called Telling Better Stories, and essentially, if you just swap out the word stories for strategy, you have, he says stories should be emotional. so should strategies. And suddenly it was a real eye opener for me. It was really quite exciting, and I got my team quite excited about that as well. And then in terms of telling stories and presenting, a person I really like is Viv Groksop. So Viv is a British journalist and writer, but she decided to retrain as a stand-up comedian and do improv. And she's written a bunch of books and does a podcast. I think it's called How to Own the Room, and it's specifically focused on encouraging women to speak up. But actually, I think the rules apply to everyone. If you can, it's about crafting the story, and then it's about telling the story. And I think you need to work on both, essentially, when it comes to pay. And you need to think about how you tailor that message for different audiences. So yeah, those are just two of the people that I really, really like.
I love it. Two amazing resources. I will make sure to link them in the show notes.
Oh.
Naomi, thank you so much for your time. This has been super insightful. As I mentioned, it's a topic that I love, so I'm absolutely going to consume those couple of pointers that you just gave us to go and follow up on. I appreciate it.
Oh, no worries at all. And I'll share some others with you, and then you can stick them in the show notes or whatever, because there's a lot of material out there.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's a wrap. We showed how storytelling drives better buy-in for compensation decisions. Not just spreadsheets, but strategies people can really believe in. I look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks for joining us on another edition of the Foundation Series. Make sure to head over to our website to subscribe to the Foundation Series for monthly editions featuring future interviews on startup compensation. In each edition, we'll explore the different strategies, trends, and challenges faced by startups around the world. If you have a burning topic you'd like me to cover or a standout guest that you want to hear from, drop me an email so I can dive deeper into the compensation topics that matter most to you. Join me next time as we continue to uncover the strategies and practices driving success in global tech startups around the world. Thanks for listening.